Hey guys, it's Amelia Singer here on Ameliorate Through Wine, where I pair wine to international guests based on their palate, personality, and personal story. I am thrilled to announce that this podcast is being vinously propelled by Rothschild Wine Collection from Goodhouse Waddesdon. Now, this really is a name synonymous with a century-old legacy of art and wine craftsmanship. I really couldn't think of a better pairing for this wine and culture podcast. From the early 1920s to the present day, the Rothschilds' profound love for both wine and art has been at the center of their journey. The family's artistic heritage distinguishes the label, often giving a unique story which adds an extra dimension to the exceptional wine. With handcrafted bottles created by inspirational artists, mesmerizing wine cellars, and even the family members themselves designing the labels on the wine bottle. The Rothschilds' timeless commitment to the fusion of wine and art is a legacy to inspire wine enthusiasts and wine connoisseurs alike. For more information, visit goodhousewaddesdon.com. And now, sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy. Hey guys, and welcome to Ameliorate Through Wine. And today I have a really, really special guest. It is Clarke OBE, wine writer. He's written so many books, he can't even remember how many books he's written. He's a broadcaster, TV presenter. Actually, I don't think that title really does him justice because he's really the country's most popular guide and cheerleader to wine. And you've been a huge inspiration in my career too. So you're also a man of many, many talents, not just wine. And we're going to be delving into that throughout the wines we're going to have today. You'll be reassured to know that all of these wines actually you probably have come across, but they all have stories, personalities, and they're not your usual necessarily wine suspects. And I chose them all with my father at our local wine shop in Gloucestershire. He says hello. And so the first two wines are from Raffles, and then the third wine is a fun supermarket wine, which my father and I enjoy, and which I think you might too. But I just want to say thank you so much. You are a true Renaissance man who cheerleads many, many things in the belief that there is far more that we have in common than what divides us. And that's a very, very important thing.
Certainly today.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's true though, isn't it?
I know.
And what brings us all together in this, if it's the world of wine, fine, but the world of wine is just one little sort of eye blink in the world.
So I think
things that bring us together.
I know.
Wine is just a strand that does that, like music does, like poetry does, like life should.
Well, you've teed me up perfectly because music is definitely going to be a theme throughout all of the wines we have.
I'm not going to have to sing, am I?
That didn't even enter my mind. This is so exciting.
Why did I mention that?
Well, we were going to be going on to your singing career. I was going to, for the first wine, I was going to be focusing more on kind of your childhood and your first kind of memories of wine. But before I get there, actually, I guess I can show you now the bottle. Actually, I know that the producer will want me to. It's Kumu River Pinot Gris 2020.
What has that got to do with my childhood?
Well, actually, that one really doesn't.
Thank you very much. My dad didn't know what Kumu River was, didn't know what Pinot Gris was, virtually didn't know what wine was.
So, okay, this one isn't so much to do with your childhood, but it's kind of why you got into wine and kind of it's a sunny personality. Also, I wanted to have a wine which championed the fruit of the new world, which this one definitely does. You also are a champion of kind of underappreciated wine styles or grapes or regions. Everyone associates this winery, Kumu River, in northern New Zealand with Chardonnay. And everyone generally tends to think of actually New Zealand with Sauvignon Blanc. But I actually think they do the wonderful aromatic grape Pinot Gris fantastically. So I thought that you'd approve of championing this underdog.
I think they do it just about better than anyone in the world, including most of northern Italy and most of Alsace. The Alsace Pinot Gris nowadays, you just think, I don't know what I'm getting. Is it going to be sweet? Is it going to be dry? Is it going to be fat? Is it going to be thin? I think that New Zealand, actually, because they understand pleasure, they understand fruit. It's difficult to make a wine in New Zealand without fruit.
Yeah.
One of the great problems they have is trying to make wine with less fruit. And of course, we're saying in Northern Europe, no, give us the fruit, give us the fruit. And they're trying to say, no, I'm trying to cut down on the fruit. I had too much fruit in this wine. And you're saying, no, please give us the fruit. Don't believe the wine critics. Don't believe the Australians who are all jealous of you. Just give us the fruit. And Pinot Gris is a classic example. The kind of Pinot Grigio you get from Northern Italy, you just think, I might as well drink tap water half the time.
Well, let's do a cheers.
Well, let's cheers to you. It's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. And I just thought, it doesn't relate to childhood, but with the first wine, I wanted something which encapsulated your joy, your cheerleading abilities, a fantastic wine. And actually, the winemaker just won Winemaker of Winemakers last week.
You're repeating yourself.
Winemaker of Winemakers.
Shall I read it out?
I'm having a stroke. Yeah. No. His name, I can never pronounce it. Michael
Brajkovic.
Because he's Croatian.
I was with him in November.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, he just won Winemaker.
You just said it correctly. I was just giving you the chance to say it again, so that you can then say, "I got it right this time."
Thanks. That's what a real friend
does.
No,
I'm your supporter. I'm your friend.
Well, you're a cheerleader.
I'm trying to make you look as good as possible.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Great no spittoon. No spittoon.
No spittoon.
Excellent. It's absolutely bursting with fruit. You see, I would have thought first of the day, hey, that's got to be sweet. It's not. That is just that amazing flavour of sort of, it's not like quite like fresh pears. It's like if you had, we did as kids, had conference pears, which don't taste very much, but you take the skin off and then you, I don't know, boil them, stew them in a little bit of sugar water and maybe a slice of lemon. That's what my mum used to do. And probably like one clove one nail of clove or a tiny bit of nutmeg, probably one nail of clove. And it's still slightly crunchy and it's half peary. It's not massively peary, but this is this whole thing about wine tasting, that when I'm trying to teach people about wine tasting, try and make it personal. So as soon as I tasted that wine, it's not, it's quite peary, but it's going back to my mum's stewed pears when I was a kid. And so much of, you must find this, Amelia, that so many, when you're trying to talk about wine tasting, so much of what you go back to is what life was like when you were a kid, maybe what life was like when you were a teenager. By the time you get to an adult, you've smelt and tasted almost everything in your life. And the things that are going to make you, as a, I don't know, 20, 40, 50, 60-year-old adult say, that's a lovely flavour. It's going to be a memory, which is from when you were 6 or 10 or 14.
And actually, that's where you get a lot of your references to, because didn't you say that you're kind of your mother's little helper?
Again and again and again.
And making sauces, and you did a lot of gardening. And
because we grew up in the country. My dad was a chest physician in the coal mines, and we never had any spare money. And we lived out in the middle of the country. And my mum's job was basically to run acres and acres of orchard and garden and sort of carrots and potatoes and every possible kind of vegetable, and a couple of hothouses and a pig and some ducks and some chickens. That was my world. They forgot to send me to school. I didn't go to school till I was about 6.5. I mean, I don't know how they got away with it. Because you're supposed to go to school at 4 or 3. I was just my mother's little helper. So all my life was about running the garden, picking the vegetables, looking after the vegetables, checking out when the plums or the cherries or the apples or the pears were ready, bringing them into the kitchen. The kitchen was my centre, because that meant day by day I was in and out of the kitchen. And of course, the morning might start with fresh, simple flavours. Although she was a baker's daughter, so there'd be some bread being baked a couple of times a week. And that's just one of the greatest smells in the world. Sometimes you get it with a barrel fermented Chardonnay. Sometimes you might get it with a sort of lees aged champagne, which has been given 10 or 15 years age. Possibly something like a Chenin, if you're really lucky in somewhere like South Africa. But it is, again, it's one of the great, great smells. You say, fresh baked bread. But what I mean is probably the fresh baked bread that my mum was making in our kitchen. Now, for you, it might be something your mum may have done, or it may be your baker.
Yeah, my mother never really baked bread. Love you, mummy, but that never happened.
Love you, mum. Didn't bake bread. You know, that is what I would say deprived childhood, Mrs. Singer. That is a direct comment to you.
But it's amazing all those resources you got, because you didn't actually grow up with wine at home, did you? It was only when you went off to university. Yeah. But actually, it was it was an essential education what you did have at home, being surrounded with all of those context of flavors and sense.
This won't last long.
I know. I discovered this with a previous podcast at Monica Galetti's restaurant, Mare, because she loves Kumi River. And I didn't even realize they did a Pinot Gris, and I introduced it to my mum last week, and now, yeah, I had to snaffle this one away from the house.
And going again back to the flavour again, do you notice how it starts with that sort of sweetish seeming peariness, but when you've swallowed it, there's a tiny bit of bitterness. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you eat pears, the pips in pears, they're not really like pips at all. They're just like slight irritations on your palate and on your tongue. They're very slightly bitter, but they're more like grainy rather than bitter. Not like an apple pip, which is genuinely bitter. It's just a bit of graininess, and it's that sort of bitterness, the kind of bitterness which makes you smile rather than the bitterness that makes you gag. That's got that bitterness. And again, Pinot Grigio, because the skins are thick, because the skins are phenolic skins. It's not a white grape. It's a pink grape. And if you leave it out there as they can, the ultraviolet penetration is so strong in New Zealand that the grapes go really dark pink. They go sort of reddish. And you can make a white wine out of that. That skin is going to have far more phenolics, bitterness in it, than something like a Sauvignon Blanc skin or a Chardonnay skin, which stays green or stays golden. This one almost goes red.
No, I just thought this was a wonderful, happy wine to start.
Yeah, really good.
And do you want to just tell, I know this story, but I know that you weren't technically brought up with wine in your childhood home, but that was where your first wine experience happened.
Oh, God, yes.
With damson wine.
That's it. Because people sort of say, how do you get involved in this wine business? And I say, you got to start young. And I started drinking when I was 3. And we were having a picnic. My dad was finishing off his doctorate at Cambridge. And we went out to have a picnic by the side of the River Ouse. And my brother was drowning in the weir. And my dad was trying to help rescue him. My mother was having hysterics. And on the side of the picnic rug, I just saw there was this bottle of my mother's damson wine, and nobody was looking, so well,
priorities.
I drank it, age 3. Actually, my brother did survive, you'll be pleased to hear.
Well, I almost thought that you would actually be the one who's in a more precarious position, drinking a whole bottle of damson wine.
My dad dragged one bedraggled son out. He looked at his other son, looking pink and lifeless on the side of the picnic rug. He picked me up and he whacked me in the stomach, and all the damson wine exited my person. It had entered my person.
That must put you off wine.
Well, it made me very fond of wines that tasted damsons. Argentine Malbec, great.
That's true.
And also, you know that a wine that tastes of damsons will taste just as good on the way back up as it did on the way down. That's important. That's student life.
Second time round, I guess, being
straight
value
down,
for money.
And if you know it's going to be tasting just as good on the way back up as on the way down, you can get yourself a jug so that when you've drunk it all, you know where the jug is, out it comes again, and then you can drink it again. It's I mean, in this ecologically sound world of ours,
cost of living crisis tip.
I could
right
be recycling
there,
that damson wine for about 2 weeks. Save me a fortune, and think, the amount of trees that don't have to be cut down simply because I'm recycling my wine all the time. So long as it tastes of damsons. I wouldn't want it to do it if it tasted of gooseberries or tasted of chocolates or tasted of beef stew. But damsons...
No, you're very discerning about, the regurgitation.
Pears, I'm not sure. I think I'll just drink this and try and keep it down.
And on that note, I think this level of discernment, it first really started when you were at Oxford, part of the wine society there, the wine tasting. Was it a wine society? Was it wine?
It's a thing I discovered in the university handbook. It was just, I went out to Oxford desperate to live the gilded youth life. I'd read Evelyn Waugh, I'd read Max Beerbohm, and I wanted to be one of these gilded youth, but I hadn't got any money. And I realised very quickly at university, the people who... Oh, and I was very interested in the opposite sex.
I was going to say, didn't you use it to pick up girls?
I did. I thought I'd been trying to get a girlfriend for about 10 years by this time. Probably longer. I mean, I remember Caroline Kraft when oh God, I think I was about 5 and she was about 5. And that was my first attempt, failed. Then her sister failed. Then Pauline Crofts failed. Then Barbara Crofts nearly succeeded, but failed. Jocelyn Crofts, that's 3 Crofts, all failed.
Wait, was this all in one family?
All in one family, yeah. Yeah.
Did you see why maybe they were fails? We'll move on. Okay.
No, I think this is something I should have learnt earlier. Anyway, I'd spent an awful lot of time trying to get a girlfriend. Eventually, I got up to university, and I read this university handbook, and it said there was a university wine tasting club, and for £2 a term, it was subsidised by the university club, and £2 a term, you could go to 4 wine tastings. 50p a tasting, and I thought it's going to make me elegant and soigné, irresistible to the opposite sex. Although you seem to be doing very well in holding yourself together in my presence.
It's hard.
But then, of course, in the small print it said, and you can take a guest. And so suddenly, it wasn't 50p a tasting; it was 50p a date. And I just thought, at last, I found my way into the hearts of the opposite sex.
And did it work? Was it successful?
Catastrophic failure. I discovered that wine tasting and trying to get a girlfriend were completely incompatible. I mean, my first girlfriend, not my first girlfriend, my first date, I was about 2 years off my first girlfriend, a girl called Francesca. And I invited her to my first wine tasting, and she was green. She had green hair. She had green sequins.
I wasn't from hanging out with you. Okay.
No, she was a lot greener after 2 hours with me, but that was the rest. But she covered herself in green body paint. She had a tiny green dress on, a tiny skimpy green top, green sequins all over her face, green hair. And there's me saying, would you like to come to my first ever wine tasting? It was a Bordeaux tasting. And I turned up with a girl who was green from top to bottom. At a Bordeaux tasting, they opened the door. Everybody else was in a pinstripe suit.
Well, good for her.
Well, she didn't last long. I mean, she only lasted about half an hour. She never even got to taste the good stuff. She'd gone. I mean, and the next girl I tasted, and the next, and the 4 girls I took to tastings in my first.
They only lasted half an hour.
None of them ever spoke to me again.
Well, didn't Chances Robinson say she would have been quite terrified going to Oxford Wine Society?
Nah. What, Francesca?
No, Jancis Robinson.
Oh.
Like when you and Charles Metcalfe ran her.
She goes on telling me stories about she's frightened of me and Charles. Honestly. We were up there at the same time. I had a girlfriend on the same staircase as her at St Anne's. That's when I finally had got a girlfriend. I never met her.
No
she
way.
Can't have been frightened. I think the point is, Jancis is a really hard-working woman and was a really hard-working girl. She was doing maths and philosophy. I was doing hanging out near the pub and punting in the evenings.
That's also theology and psychology.
Well, right? That's what they called it, yes. Well, thank you for reminding me that I was supposed to be doing a bit of reading. But Jancis was a really hard-working girl.
No,
I would be very surprised if she was going to get interested in going to wine tastings at Oxford, whatever.
No, that's a good point.
But,
well, I'm sorry that wine didn't lead to a successful dating life. However, it seems to have maybe worked out later on in life. Before we get onto that section, I have a couple of little questions about wine and at home and how you enjoy it. Well, I'm glad that you seem to be enjoying this one. That's a start. What do you enjoy drinking at home?
Whatever's open.
Yeah, you must get sent so much stuff.
I do, but I say no to a lot of stuff.
Do you?
So they've got the message. I say to them, please, I'll ask you if I want a sample. Because it used to be just stuff piling up.
No, it's overwhelming.
And you just sort of think, that's all very well, but, and I like drinking. And sometimes, particularly, I don't know about you, but during COVID, my sort of patterns changed because it must be, 9 months we went without a single wine tasting?
Oh, yeah.
And so to keep my palate in order, because the silly thing is, having your palate in training is just the same as playing cricket or playing football. You can't just wander around and say, I haven't tasted wine for 3 months. Oh, I'll be good at this. Because you've got hundreds and thousands of tiny muscles and tiny electromagnetic activities happening all the time. You've got 5 million receptors up here, all of which need to be continually trained about saying, what does it taste of? What does it taste of? Find the flavour, find the flavour. And then, of course, describe the flavour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really difficult thing about wine tasting. The sense of smell, which is most of wine tasting, because when we've got the wine in our mouth, I mean, we're smelling it. You put the wine in your mouth, your tongue's doing nothing. Your tongue's just giving you what? Bitterness, sweetness, acid and salt. That's all the tongue does.
I like the tongue
Umami,
for body.
Body, yes.
Yeah,
great.
like, you know, because like this, for instance, like satiny and succulent and...
But you know, if we do
like
this,
that's what I like.
if we do this, do it. All you're getting is you're just getting the body.
Yeah, that's true. It's like
And
what you do.
acid.
It's like what you do with cough medicine, so you wouldn't taste it as a kid.
But then you release your nose, and your mouth just fills with flavour.
Yeah,
and I think people don't
it's so
expect them. Because it fills with flavour because, of course, we've breathed up into our nasal cavity there when there's 5 million receptors all desperate to say, quick, is it pears, is it apples, is it blackcurrants? All up there. None of it's happens down here.
No, you're right. And I remember you even telling me, like, during COVID, how before things opened up, you actually would line up bottles of wine. Like, about how many did you take? Like, you would kind of... You said it was almost like Olympian kind of the amount of bottles, just to, like,
just take them out from under the
memory.
stairs week after week. All those
tasting.
The old and filthies that you thought I'll have that one time. They all came out. I'm running out of old and filthies, which is a problem because I like old and filthies. Taking wines out, you think this is going to be terrible, and you pull the cork out and you scratch it out with a fork and a spoon, and the stuff tastes fascinating. It's one of my great joys when a wine you think this should be so dead and it isn't. I think it's tremendous fun. That
that's really fun.
But going back to the tasting thing, that I think one of the thrills of wine tasting, but why you really have to keep practicing. It's people who think, oh, wine tasting, you've got to keep practicing. You poor old thing, opening bottles and shoving it down your throat. Oh, that's such hard work. But it's putting words to flavours, because our flavours are based on our sense of smell, which is our original sense. And words, of course, are just about the most recent thing that the human brain has learnt how to use. I don't know how old words are, 20,000 years old? Something like that?
About that.
How old is our sense of smell? 1 million, 2 million, 3 million years old? Maybe more. And we've got to put our most primal experience onto our most modern way of expression.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Well,
and you have to practice.
Well, and that's why I kind of think wine and music work really well, which we'll be getting onto a bit later. But because I just think that, again, it's that primal kind of connection. But before we do, I was going to ask a question. I'm genuinely curious about this. Have you ever detoxed?
In what way?
Just like not...
every month, probably... Without caring too much about how and why. I mean, I don't go around detoxing. I just think, I'm not going to drink today.
Do you feel like, I'm of the same thing, I think particularly if you work in wine, it's very hard to say, like I've never done dry Jan. I've never done a whole month. No. I can do, I think, on a regular basis, 2 or 3 days where I don't drink.
Yep.
But... I do struggle.
Next week, I won't drink. I know, just looking at my diary, I won't drink from Thursday next week till the Tuesday after. I just look at my diary, I won't be drinking.
Yeah.
It's just because I won't be with people who are drinking. So I won't drink.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think, hell, I've been working all day. I just want to drink. So I'll go and open a bottle of wine. Pull the cork. Could be, the last bottle of wine I opened like that.
I was going to say, what was that?
It was a 1999... Brunello de Montalcino,
nice.
La Gerla.
Yeah.
Not particularly exciting.
Yeah.
But it was an old and filthy. I thought, oh, that one needs drinking. So I just said, I've been working quite hard. And I thought, hey, it's 6, 7 o'clock at night. I feel like a drink. People who work as accountants, they go to the pub or they have a couple of gin and tonics.
Yeah.
People come home and they pour themselves a big gin and tonic every day. Now, we don't do that as wine people. But sometimes you just say, I'm in that kind of mood today. So you just go and crack open a bottle, and I just want it to be interesting. I don't want it to be the local sample of half a dozen supermarket-owned labels that I've got to taste.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
Sometimes that's what you drink. If you find a really good one, you think, I'll drink that. You do your tasting, 6 wines, 12 wines, 18 wines, it all depends. And you say, what do I drink at home? Well, sometimes it's that.
Yeah.
But and sometimes it's I collect beer, for instance. So I've got beers going back to the 1980s. Ancient Edward.
How does that age?
Some of them absolutely wonderfully. Some of the hardy ales, for instance, which when they used to be brewed by Eldridge Pope of Dorchester, are in sensational nick to this day. Some of the Fuller's vintage ales from the 90s are still in fantastic nick.
Yeah.
Some of the J.W. Lee's Harvest ales from Lancashire are in really great nick. It all depends what you got. The great old Gales prize old ales from Hampshire, they were spectacularly good for 20 years. They're now brewed in Chiswick. Don't taste remotely the same, but they do age. And I've got loads of these bottles. And sometimes I just think, time for an imperial Russian stout or something. And this is the stuff that they used to send off to Catherine the Great. And the recipe's got to be different because barley's different nowadays, hops are different nowadays, the shape of vats are different nowadays. Using electricity and gas is different from using coal and wood. Everything is different. This is why beer is a constantly changing thing, because you can't make beer like they used to make it. You can't get those barleys, you can't get those hops. But I still love to look back. It's a bit like Bordeaux isn't the same as it was 25 years ago. Burgundy's not the same as it was 25 years ago. Rioja and Chianti are not the same.
Well, I was going to say, if you could bring back one retro wine to the present, like either a brand or a style or whatever, what would it be?
It would be the old style, I say, without hesitation. Old-fashioned Bordeaux at its best.
So how Bordeaux, far back?
Like my first ever Bordeaux, the one that I played with Francesca. Well, Francesca left by then.
She left then.
So I had her sample as well as mine. Lervel Barton, 1962. And that was a wine that was quintessential old-fashioned Bordeaux. And it was bone dry, but it had tons of fruit, but it was a blackcurrant fruit, a pure blackcurrant fruit, absolutely sucked dry of every ounce of sweetness. So all you had was the essence of the fruit. And then hovering over the top of it was this amazing smell of cigar boxes and cedar and Havana tobacco. And mix that together and have a mouthful of that. If I could regularly find that, that would be the one wine I would bring back. But you can't find it because it's made from grapes that are all thrown in together. They're not ripe in the same way. That would have been made at 12% alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
12.1
You're not going
alcohol.
to find that now.
You won't find it. The same wine will be 14 now. And they'll say, oh, we can't do 12. Well, that's because the way you grow grapes is so much better now than it was then, that you can't get these underripe grapes mixed with overripe, mixed with perfectly ripe. They'll take the underripe ones out if they're there still. They'll take the overripe ones out. So they say, throw the whole bloody lot in. See, if you want to talk about the terroir, this French thing about its sense of place, well, the sense of place ought to be saying, there's the vine, I'll come back in a month and see what it's done. Instead of I'm going to go out every single day and snip off anything which is imperfect. Because eventually, that way, and so many wine consultants and vineyard consultants do that, and say, well, we're now expressing the pure terroir. You're sort of imposing your human view on the terroir, because all terroirs are going to be imperfect. Like, all great singers are imperfect, all great dancers are imperfect, all great novels are full of imperfections. That's sort of what makes them exciting. And too many people trying to make too many wines perfect. I often think that the trouble with great so-called great wines is that everyone thinks, that one has been highly successful, let's try and make that. And it's the exact opposite to parfumier. People who make perfumes, they don't try and say, a great parfumier doesn't try and say, that Kalesh, let's try and make Kalesh. Chanel number 5, let's try and make Chanel number 5. They don't do that. They go out and say, how can I now create something which has never existed before? And wine people don't do that normally. Wine people normally go out and say, how can I make another example of something which was really successful so I can do it too? And it's probably that wine isn't as artistic and as an ethereal and memorable as really great scent. I think scent is actually fundamentally more exciting, more long-lasting, and more memorable than wine can be.
Well, and I think immediately transportive too. Yeah.
And when I'm on long-distance flights, I sometimes go into the duty-frees and I just roll up my arms like that and I start putting scents from all the free samples, up and down both arms like that. And for the next 4 or 5 hours, I'm just going, just as they gradually develop on your skin. And people must think I'm slightly, well, people think I do lots of strange things in airplanes.
I was going to say, yeah. Like,
but, you know, I'm just continuing, you know, you're then thinking, oh, that's fascinating, that joy, Patu's joy or something, that has changed massively from just being there on my skin for 2 hours, and one further down there you think, oh, that's a more citrusy kind of smell, and no, it hasn't really developed over 2 hours. It's fascinating. Keeps you off the gin and tonic when you're 5 hours out of Buenos Aires.
Well, I'm going to bring us onto the second wine, because that is when I really want to kind of talk about what got you excited about wine, and actually the aspects of wine which were really new and exciting, something different. And the wine world is constantly changing. Even when we do have wineries wanting to do cookie cutter examples, there is a lot of, you're always having to learn with wine. And I kind of thought that was something we could explore with the next one.
Good.
Great. Okay.
So we're on the pink stuff.
We are on the pink
Summer
stuff.
is a coming in.
Well, this is also, I wanted to have something to show you don't just have to drink rosé when it's full of sunshine. I actually love drinking rosé all year round. This is a particularly, I would say, gastronomic, foodie rosé. The colour might scare some people, but because it's slightly, how would you describe that pink?
Non-pink. I would describe that as professional, professional, trendy pink. In other words, the wine probably wanted to have a much pinker colour than that, but that's the colour of Provence rosé, so that's what everyone makes. No. And it's what you make the wine that colour, it's immediately worth 2 or 3 quid more. If you make it its real colour, which is probably quite a full pink, they really have this trouble in places like Australia, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, where the ultraviolet penetration makes the grapes really burst with colour. The skins are really full of colour. It's difficult to make a wine like this without having to sort of carbon filter it. To make wine like this I suspect is from rather a good producer, they probably made a wine like this by hardly pressing it at all.
Well, you're right, because it looks like it could be from Provence, but it is not.
It'll have 3 times as much flavour and be less expensive.
Exactly. And I want to champion the Languedoc, which I think is a really underappreciated region. I thought you would. I
completely agree.
So, this is Syrah Grenache from Saint-Chinian.
Oh, lovely.
And from Domaine, well, actually, I don't think they can call it a domain anymore because they're a Vin de Paix. So, actually, no, they can. Okay, so Domaine La Lozetta.
Sounds lovely.
And it's the Corteza Rosé. It's 2021. So it shows that actually, I think when people think, oh, rosés, they only last a year. I wanted to show you a really interesting, nuanced, age-worthy rosé. I know, it's happy and
stuffing. It immediately smells as though it's got proper grapes in there. Mm-hmm. Provence smells as though it's got a proper marketing budget.
No, these are from old vines, dry farmed, all organic, very big into sustainability. They're also, like you, they're hugely into music. So it's called Lausetta, but they host every year these music festivals, and in August called Lausette, as in like
those hills there.
Yeah, up in the hills.
Saint-Chinian is the most sensational place. I mean, it's full of great those crags. They're not hills, they're crags.
Like the schistous, which I think gives it a bit of verve, which I like.
No, it's a real.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I thought this would be a fun one. I thought,
You smell it and you think, this is proper wine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to ask you, can I put some Angostura in it? Yum! It's wine. It's absolutely not the kind of stuff that we get sold as rosé. It's got a bit of bitterness to it.
Yep.
Quite acidic. And there's that schisty thing. Now, tell us exactly what schist is.
I thought you were going to do the honours.
Oh, damn. I was thinking, I've spent years trying to work out what schist is. Amelia
as opposed to like other, like schist, as opposed to schist.
So schist, it's like slate.
Yeah.
It's granity, slatey. In other words, we're talking about a type of soil which genuinely gives you the chance to say, hey, I can sort of taste the rocks, I can sort of taste the pebbles, I can taste the earth in that, taste the dust, and you get that in that, don't you? And how it manifests itself is it's one of the great mysteries of modern wine tasting. A, how does that flavour get in there?
I know.
And
there's a lot of twist
how do you describe it?
How do you describe it? Exactly. I mean, for me, I just like to think it gives it an extra, like, kind of verve. It's a bit like when you add salt to your food. It kind of like brings out an extra like essence in the wine, and it's almost like a white pepper resinous, vervey.
Bit of white pepper, not
white
black.
pepper. No, I meant white pepper.
Where the white just prickles on your palate.
Exactly.
And black pepper goes up into your nasal cavity.
Yeah, this just prickles on the palate with like red currants and a little bit of nectarine. I just thought
white apple or pink apple. Do you think pink?
Ooh,
I mean, there's an apple flavour.
Yeah.
Well, if it was pink lady, it would have to have things like red currants or white currants going with it because the acidity is quite marked. 2021, of course, not a hot year.
Not a hot year. So no, I really want to choose. I mean, this is again from Raffles. Shout out to Raffles.
Raffles.
I don't know why.
Singapore, you're gonna love it.
I don't know why this is
It'll only cost you £6,000 to get there. The wine will be nice and cheap when you get there. No, take a train from Paddington.
Take a train. I wanted to double check how much it was. I think it's £22. £22.15, which, like, I know that I actually think now Whispering Angel is what, 23 quid? 24 quid? This is so much more interesting and gastronomic and just...
What's interesting is Whispering Angel has actually got better. And I think Whispering Angel, the latest release.
Oh, the latest.
They've obviously decided that they can't just go along on their backside and sort of rake in all the plaudits. They've got to try harder, and they are trying harder. And I think that the latest Whispering Angel is much better than the previous ones. But it's completely different. This is far more serious wine. If you want the colour, that is as trendy a pink colour as you can get. The very pale colour. But I'm surprised that is it Grenache and Syrah?
With a tiny bit of Sancerre.
Yeah, but
Grenache
like
a little smidgen. Yeah.
So it's not easy to get that colour from Grenache and Syrah. I think they've done a very good job.
Florian.
Shut your eyes and put it in your mouth. You've got a mouthful of wine. You haven't got a mouthful of marketing.
Mm-hmm. No, and I love the story. It's actually the vineyards were bought in 2015 by an English guy, Tom Hills, and then he employed a Norman winemaker, Florian, who's worked around the world. And so it hasn't been going for that long, but they just work with these like old vines, dry farmed, very organic, into sustainability, and making, I think, really elegant and different kind of rosé.
And those villages of the Languedoc are full of potentially wonderful vineyard sites, which bit by bit people are making great wine out of, but it's taking a long time, isn't it? 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was writing, the Languedoc is the new world on the Med. It's all happening. And it's been really slow, because actually, the new world idea, lovely cheap Chardonnay, lovely cheap Cabernet, didn't really work.
Well, I was going to say, what got you into wine really was discovering all the new flavours and just experiences you had with New World wine. Yeah. Like, that's really what got you excited.
Without New World, Gilly Gould and I just could not have done BBC Food and Drink. We needed
you did that for 2 decades.
We needed a hero. We did it for 2 decades.
2 decades.
BBC Two's most popular
1982
show. To... a bit later than that.
Wait, 19...
but I mean, it was at its peak. Sort of late 80s, all the way through the 90s, into the noughties. When Ginny left, I went on doing it with Anthony Warren Thompson.
Of course, yeah.
And then that morphed into James May, and suddenly one just thought, I've been doing this for about 30 years.
And that's really what got, I think, people into wine. You're really bringing wine to the people and the New World flavours too.
Point. However you do it, whether you do it by fun or laughter or madness, you've got to have flavours in those wines. And what Italy was offering us, what Spain was offering us, what Germany, what France, great, wonderful France, were offering us hardly any affordable wines which tasted of anything you wanted to put in your mouth. The quality of basic wine coming out of Spain, Italy, France in the 1980s was execrable. And luckily, I'd been to Australia as an actor. I'd been out with I'd been out with the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 70s. I was doing a world tour with Glenda Jackson of Hedda Gabler. I mean, 6 months with Glenda Jackson is enough to drive a man to drink. I admit it freely. But luckily, Patrick Stewart was on the trip as well. So Patrick and I became good buddies. And he would often come off at half time in Hedda Gabler and say, "Oh my God, that bloody woman! Oh, go and get me some wine." And I was the young squit in the Royal Shakespeare Company, the sort of the young actor who just did all the bits and pieces. So I would dash out to the bottle shop and bring back these bottles of Shiraz or Riesling or things like that, or Burgundy. None of them came anywhere near places like France. They were just all Australian wines for $1 or $2 a bottle, just bursting with flavour. We then went over to California and Hollywood. We played Hollywood, which is great. And again, we had the same thing. The Californians were drinking wonderful cheap wine. The Australians were drinking wonderful cheap wine. What was wrong with us in Europe? And I came back as an actor. I wasn't a wine guy.
Yeah, because you were an actor and singer for 10 years at least before you got... Yeah.
And I was saying, but this is... They make wonderful wine in places like Australia and California. Nobody listened. And about, best part of 10 years later, when I was doing General Perron in Evita, and I managed to get 6 days off because we were bringing in a new Evita. So she had to be rehearsed, and then we had a big photo session for all our big front of theatre photos. And Robert Stigwood said, "Okay, you can have 6 days off. You've got to do the Thursday matinee, and we'll put the understudy on for the evening show, but then you've got to be back on the next Thursday morning for the photo shoot, for bringing in the new Evita the week after." And I went to Australia. It takes a day and a half to get there, a day and a half to get back. I was there about 3.5 days. And that was the second time I spent, that's where I met Gilly Goulden. I met Gilly Goulden.
Where you met Gilly Goulden?
I was sat, she wasn't a wine writer. I wasn't a wine writer. I was playing General Perron in Evita. She was writing for Brides magazine and just written a book on palmistry. God knows why they thought that she and me were worth taking to Australia, but they did. Maybe no one else would go. I mean, literally, maybe no one else would go. So we went, and I sat down next to her in economy. Went all the way to Australia, stopping about 6 times on the way. We're not talking about a fast flight. We stopped in I don't know, Frankfurt, and we stopped in Athens, and we stopped in Colombo, and we stopped in, God knows, Port Moresby and Darwin, and God knows where else. And I spent all this time drinking Jacob's Creek Shiraz Grenache with Gilly Goulden. And I don't think we slept for 24 hours. We just nattered and nattered and nattered and nattered. I learnt more about life, not wine, life, from Gilly Goulden in 24 hours on a plane, hoovering back the Jacobs Creek Shiraz Grenache than I think I've ever learnt anywhere else in the whole history of my life. And that's where I didn't know at the time. We were just cementing this relationship, which was going to mean that we could become this madcap couple on British television. Everyone presumed we were married. We never were. They said, "But you must be having an affair." No, we weren't. "Well, why are you having separate bedrooms?" "Because we have separate bedrooms. We're not married. We're not having an affair. We're just really good mates doing a television show together." The world thought we were all married. And if we weren't married, we must be having this massive fling.
But I think that's what worked so well, the fact that you guys weren't from a traditional wine expert background. You got called up because the original presenter couldn't do it. So the producer was like, "Bring me that guy, the actor who knows about wine."
That's how.
And I think that natural relationship worked really, really well. And then I think also combining with the fact that you're so open-minded, you weren't so set in the ways of we can only talk about France or Italy.
I think Gilly and I, when we suddenly realised that we had this wonderful producer called Peter Bazalgette. I don't know if you've ever met him. He was a supremely talented and imaginative television producer. Ended up as head of ITV and God knows what. He probably still is, for all I know. He, by the way, likes going for drinks in Goulburn Road, so be careful. You might meet him and me down there when we go for a drink. But he was a very innovative, open-minded guy, and he basically thought that, he said, the great secret of television is tell a story and have a relationship. And he said, if you've got those two, you've just got television gold. And he saw straight away that Gilly and I just hit it off. And part of it was because I was a henpecked hubby. I was treated abominably on television. And there were times, I mean, on television, I remember me talking to camera. She puts her hand over my mouth. No, just talking to I'm still talking to camera. She would come on camera and push me off. This is all live. And Peter Basil was going, yes, yes, yes. And Pete, he came out to me, Baz, and said, she treats you terribly. Do you mind? And I said, no, it's fine. I know what she's doing. It's absolutely fine. He said, oh, thank goodness, because he said it's television gold. It's a relationship. The only person who hated it, of course, was my mum. Oh, that woman treats you so badly. I don't know why you put up with it. But everybody else just loved this idea of the henpecked hubby and this batty blonde and their relationship. And because we talked about wine, and we talked about wine in completely unheard of terms. Well, we didn't use any wine terms at all.
Well, like the first one I brought, because you once said like happy juice. You once described wine as happy juice. And I was like, yeah, this is happy juice. The Pinot Gris we had, yeah.
I've still got some of the T-shirts from that time. And one of them just said fruit, fruit, fruit. Because I remember taking a wine, it's probably New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc or Australian Chardonnay. And I was going, fruit, fruit, fruit. I remember saying it to the camera. And all the wine people think, yeah, I hope he spills out all over his makeup. Well, I probably did. Fruit, fruit, fruit. It's going all down my head. But B, they absolutely hated it. The wine establishment absolutely hated it. And to this day, I still get it in the neck from some of the old codgers.
Really?
To this day.
Really? Even all that you've done, all the books
all
that you've
of this
done,
stuff. I still get
OBE.
snide comments from some of the old codgers. Not all of them. Some of them realised that if it wasn't for the New World, they wouldn't have a business. Because the New World, the reason going back to the New World that Gilly and I, because we did, when we talked about this new show, Food and Drink, we said, we don't like the traditional English wine trade. They don't like us. But they're not getting through to the world of wine. 5 or 10% of the population drank wine, that's all. By the time we'd finished the end of the 90s, 85% of the population drank wine. And we just said, well, let's try and democratize wine. And we said, we can do it. Yes, we can, if we have heroes. But we must talk in our own terms. And Gilly's batty terms. I mean, how many people actually know what a baby's bottom smells like? But Gilly knows. She had 3 kids, and she had, another baby's bottom. And there's me, a single man, thinking, no idea what you're talking about, but baby's bottom. We find, this one's the bottom of a hamster's cage. All black. This goes on and on. One of those things, wheelbarrows full of ugly fruits. Now, she could have said, that tastes citrus, and a wine taster would have said that. But no, Gilly Goulden says it smells like wheelbarrows full of ugly fruits. Now, which is better? That tastes citrus or wheelbarrows full of ugly fruits?
Are you still friends with her now?
Yeah, absolutely. She's a smasher. Yeah. I think she's just as good as ever she was. And, she and I probably ought to be prancing around BBC Two at this very minute doing Food and Drink. But we needed heroes. France couldn't provide the heroes. Spain couldn't provide the heroes. Italy couldn't provide the heroes. But good old Australia could. In Australia, they only made wine because they wanted a decent glass of something to drink. That's why they made wine. It's not a wine-drinking nation. It's not an anything nation. It's a nation that the modern Australia that we know, the Eurocentric Australia, only started a couple of 100 years ago. And everything came from scratch. And if 50, 60 years ago, they drank beer and port. And the wine revolution was led by a bloke called Len Evans, who was a sort of a larrikin of the first order. But he was a tremendous exploiter and persuader. And he persuaded people that a glass of table wine with their food was a good idea. But it had to taste good. Otherwise, the Aussies would say, you don't know what you're talking about, mate.
So then what made you pivot from the New World then to England? Or would you describe that as the new world?
It is the new world.
Yeah.
I've actually been writing about English wine just about as long as I've been writing about Australian wine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realise that.
And I've got tasting notes going back 40 years on English wine. And they're interesting to read because they're almost entirely without merit. But I'm looking all the time, trying to see, because it's our country. That's why. I just thought there's not much to be proud of yet, But it's our country. And if they're going to try and make wine, I'm going to be there with them.
And what are you most excited about now in terms of English wine?
Still sparkling wine.
Yeah.
Sparkling wine particularly.
Yeah.
I think that the progress that's been made in sparkling wine in the last 10 years is nothing short of remarkable. We were making some decent sparkling wines 15 years ago. One or two people like Nye Timber and Ridgeview were doing it 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But it's in the last 10 years. And as a country, our acceptance and our enthusiasm for English wine is about 6 years old. It's not 10 years old even. It was that really hot summer of 2018 when the heat went onto the front pages of the newspapers, not page 36. And the story of sunshine, heat wave was on page 1 of the tabloids, page 1 of the broadsheets, page 1 in all the news feeds. Heat. And everyone began to think, wow, is this going to be regular? And everyone's saying, global warming, this is happening now, this is example, it's going to be like this again and again and again. And instead of, even 6-7 years ago, people would be saying, oh, English wine, really? I didn't know we made any. And then about 5 years ago, they say, oh, English, is it? Well, really, it's rather good, eh? Rather good for English. And about 3 or 4 years ago, they were starting to say things, oh, that's a lovely English wine. Oh, I wonder where I can get that. Where's the vineyard, you said? I must go and visit it. And now, and COVID in a strange way helped this, because COVID and Brexit,
I was going to say.
Brexit has forced us to look for, whatever one thinks about Brexit, it's forced us to look in on ourselves and say, well, if our politicians are making such a mess of our lives, we have to start trying to support ourselves, support our communities, support the people around. What do we want to live in? Do we want to live in ghost towns? Do we want to live in an utter mess? Or do we want to say, okay, we'll try and do some good in our area, whether it's Kent or Sussex or Hampshire or Dorset or Derbyshire or Lincolnshire or Yorkshire, wherever it happens to be. Start supporting your local all over again. I know cost of living crisis has again given a real kick in the teeth to all kinds of businesses, pubs, butchers, bakers, wineries too. But it has forced us to look in on ourselves. And I do think people have discovered that why should you buy champagne when England makes just as good a drink?
Didn't you get banned from champagne in the 90s?
Oh, yes, I've been banned, I think, twice. Banned from Bordeaux, banned from Champagne. Basically banned from Champagne for saying, you guys are taking the piss. And stop taking the piss. And their immediate response was, oh, absolutely disgraceful. Someone telling the truth, ban him. You know, I had the same with Bordeaux. I said, you know, stop taking the piss and sending us these second-rate wines which you're charging too much for. Oh, God, someone telling the truth, ban him. I mean, it's a big problem with the wine writing fraternity, is that we rely endlessly on sort of hospitality to understand our business. And it's very, very easy, certainly at the upper end of the market. Burgundy is another example. You're rude about Burgundy, they say, just don't invite him to any tastings. You can't visit us. Champagne, Bordeaux, Piedmont
What do you think is the biggest challenge working in the wine industry?
Objectivity is one of them. Simple objectivity. Even if you go to the Aldi or the Sainsbury's or the Waitrose tasting, and you like the people there, and you think, oh, I remember we used to work together, blah 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 blah, and suddenly you think, how good is this wine? I'll give you a decent mark, you know, rather than thinking, no, these wines are simply not good enough, and I'm going to say so. Simply not good enough, and I'm going to say so. We have more good wine now in the world than we've ever had.
That's true.
So it's much less of a problem. I would have said 15 years ago, 20 years ago, certainly, objectivity was... That's why Gilly and I got into such a trouble all the time, because we started saying, don't do this, don't buy that,
you were like the little boy in the Emperor's New Clothes.
Yeah. The Emperor's New Clothes in the 1990s. Champagne was the Emperor's New Clothes. Burgundy was the Emperor's New Clothes. Barolo and Barbaresco were Emperor's New Clothes in the 1990s. And if anyone said so, there was that sense of you've crossed a line here. And that's what, in a way, why Robert Parker was so important, because he said, although things went badly wrong in the second half of his reign, but the first half of his reign was saying, nobody talks the truth about wine, so I'll tell the truth about wine. And he was really important for 10 or 15 years until it all started going wrong. But the New World, Gillian and I could not have done what we did without the New World. I couldn't have written my books without the New World, because the New World basically said, we're trying to make something taste nice. You know, that old thing of, you know, hello, what do you blokes like to drink? Ah, we'll go and make it for you. Instead of this, we have been making it for 6 generations, and if you don't like it, that's not our problem. That's the German way of doing it, anyway. I can't remember. Italian. Oh, it's French. It's now Europe has taken the New World approach of the consumer matters to heart, and has done for 20 years. And now, in a way, this whole thing of the vineyard, the terroir, we're getting all this with the natural wine movement and wild yeasts and terroir and
skin contact,
all these things are all now different ways of saying, actually, just because the wine tastes good isn't good enough anymore. Well, for the majority of the population, wine tasting good is good enough. We go on with all these movements because so long as they're movements, I don't mind. When they become ideologies, like the natural wine thing was in danger of becoming an ideology. And people like you and me were toxic because we said, no, that's not a very good wine. It's natural. It's got to be good. No, it doesn't. And people were saying, it doesn't matter what the wine tastes like so long as it is made in a natural way. And you think, excuse me, can I use the word? Yes. It's bollocks.
Yeah.
It's bollocks. Basically, wine is there to give pleasure. Now, if you want to find an ethical and moral way to give yourself pleasure by doing all kinds of special things which mean something to you as a wine producer, that's fine. But your objective in life, the only reason you make that product has to be to give wine pleasure to the consumer. And if you lose sight of that, my feeling is you've lost sight of why you're in the wine business.
I completely agree. And talking of like being a visionary and having sights on things, where do you think is another frontier or kind of an underappreciated region which you're really excited about, which you think it might be having a moment or possibly it will be soon?
Well, further north in England.
Yeah. East
Anglia in England, because East Anglia is showing a great ability to make table wines of a really exciting sort.
We've had Yorkshire wine here.
Yeah, Leventhorpe or Yorkshire Heart. Or
we didn't have Yorkshire Heart.
Rydale.
No, I need
Laurel.
He knows his Yorkshire wine.
There are about 30 vineyards now in Yorkshire, and there's a Yorkshire vineyard trail.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that some really lovely stuff coming out of Yorkshire. There's some lovely stuff coming out of North Wales. There's some lovely stuff coming out of Monmouthshire in the south. There's some remarkable stuff coming out of Gloucestershire and Dorset and and Somerset.
I mean,
I would say where am I excited about? I could say, I'm excited about what's happening. I don't know. In Holland or in Belgium, and that's fine. But in a way, there are exciting wines coming out of places like Denmark and Sweden and all this. But I sort of find myself saying, "Yep, fine. You get excited about this. I'm interested, but you get excited. I'll go on getting excited about our country because we're just starting out on this wonderful path, and we don't know how long global warming is going to be kind to us." Because the Gulf Stream is going to stop. And when the Gulf Stream stops, the waters around the British Isles will drop in temperature by maybe 6, maybe 7 degrees centigrade, which means that's the end of us growing Chardonnay in Norfolk. Probably the end of anybody growing anything in Yorkshire and Derbyshire. But if it might not happen for another 100 years, but it could happen tomorrow. The Gulf Stream flow is already, I think, at its weakest for something like 1,600 years. It hasn't been this weak. And when it gets to a tipping point and you just haven't got that push north and that pull south, when that breaks, it may not come together again, and suddenly you've lost the great heating. The whole of the North Atlantic is heated by this Gulf Stream. and it could stop tomorrow. But if it doesn't stop, and I think in Britain we are making a real effort on global warming. I think that we spend far too much time in this country castigating ourselves and flagellating our backs and say, aren't we terrible, aren't we terrible? We're making a lot more effort than most other countries around Europe and the rest of the world to deal with global warming. It isn't enough, but we are actually putting a lot of effort into it. But even so, it's entirely likely that in 40, 50 years' time, if the Gulf Stream hasn't stopped, the Thames Valley will probably be too hot to grow grapes in. We'll be growing Chardonnay in Yorkshire. Sparkling wine. It'll be the Peak District in Derbyshire or southern Scotland. And
what about Ireland? You're Irish.
Too wet, because the hotter we get, the warmer the Atlantic gets, the more evaporation rises up into the skies, and the heavier the clouds get. And that's why we're getting such enormously heavy rainstorms in this country now. Rather than the normal British drizzle, just endless drizzle, we get tropical downpours. They might only last for 10 or 15 minutes, but the streets are flooded. Instead of 20 years ago, just drizzle. Streets were never flooded. Just a bit of drizzle. But that drizzle and that greyness meant you couldn't ripen grapes. Well, you can. If there's a tropical downpour and the sun comes out again, so long as you've sprayed properly to make sure that mildew doesn't start, you can ripen grapes easily. And things are going to get more extreme and more extreme, which means that places like Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex and maybe East Kent are going to become more and more favoured because they're further away from the weather systems that pile in from the west and dump on us. September and October in somewhere like Essex, they say down there some years that it's drier than the Sahara. There's just no rain at all. September and October, just when you're ripening your grapes. That's why Essex can bring a Pinot Noir red wine.
I was going to say, they make good footballers in Pinot Noir.
Yeah. 14.7% alcohol. 14.7% alcohol.
That is nuts.
In Essex, Pinot Noir red wine. It's bonkers. You know, Sussex and Hampshire might be pleased to get 9.5%, 10% alcohol. Essex, 14.7%. That's because it's the driest place in the country. Not the hottest. You don't have to be that hot to make really lovely wine. You don't want to be that hot. You do need to be relatively dry. But even Essex, it's still England. We're not talking about the same dryness as the middle of Spain. But it's still England, but it's dry. And so we're going to have more and more extreme conditions. They're going to affect how we live. But the vineyards are one of those silver linings in a pretty dark cloud.
Yeah, no, that was an important, heavy but very important topic. And thank you for sharing this, because I know that you've also been a visionary about climate change too, from the early 90s before everyone else.
Oh God, yes. I made my first speech about global warming in 1993.
Yeah.
In New York, in the Great Wine Experience in New York. And I stood up and I was doing the keynote speech, and I said, you've got to start talking about climate change. You've got to start looking at vineyards. You've got to start thinking we may have to change our grape varieties. We may have to move our vineyards north. And there was a great murmur in the room, and then a shout, and then angry protest. And all these people, mostly French, they got up in this great big hall in New York, and they all walked out. And I remember 4 people didn't walk out. Angelo Gaia, Piero Antinori, Christian Wex, and Miguel Torres. Oh, no. They all stood up, walked right down to the front row, sat in the front row, right in front of me, and they said, don't you worry, we're listening. And I've never, ever forgotten that here was a young squit in the wine world, just trying to make a big speech and being completely thrust aside by the wine establishment, but not by those 4. Thank you, you 4.
And now I think you'd have the whole room with you.
Oh. Now I would, yes.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on to the next one, but no, I think, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, because I think it is a really important topic, and people bang on about sustainability and whatever, but times are changing now, things need to change now. Yeah. I'm going to bring out a wine to link to something, another strand. We talked about wine being a strand, and this is another strand, which will be a kind of little lifter and lightness after this very important but quite heavy topic.
So that will be related to Gillingham Football Club.
Now, I'm a loyal patron of my local Majestic, and this is from Chile, a country which you championed from the beginning. Montes Winery, which has been around since 1987, and they're kind of considered the first real, like, premium wineries.
And my first trip to Chile, I went to see them.
No way!
Yeah, in 1989. I went to Chile to cover the end of Pinochet's regime and the beginning of democracy. I went to Chile for the first time to cover their first democratic elections in 1989.
No way!
And purely by chance, there was some wine to visit. So I thought, oh, that sounds a lot nicer than hanging around in Santiago waiting for vote results.
Well, also, this just shows wine is like one thread, but there's all threads kind of lead to similar things. Montes, they really believe in the power of the senses and music being essential to kind of wine appreciation. And they actually did research with Edinburgh University saying how different music and different composers can affect how one tastes. So really, we're enjoying the Merlot, the single vineyard Merlot, which has been exclusively made for Majestic, and it's been 12 months in oak, so hopefully it'll be lovely and succulent. But I was looking at suggested playlists, and I didn't think we could play music on the podcast. But what I should have done with pouring this wine, apparently the music recommendation for this Merlot is Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, Easy by Lionel Richie, Over the Rainbow by Eva Cassidy, or Heartbeats by Jose Gonzalez. And if I'd cracked open the single vineyard Chardonnay, I should have played Blondie or Kylie Minogue.
That is so not what Aurelia Montes told me.
Oh, really?
Aurelia Montes told me that it was Gregorian chant.
Well, apparently that's what they play during the winemaking process.
Yeah, that's right.
And
it's this endless
yes.
No,
but yeah,
nobis dominus, no.
This was this one article I read.
That's right.
Beautiful, yes. Professor Adrian North, who led the research, explained that when a powerful piece of music such as O Fortuna from Karl Orff's Carmina Burana is played, go for it.
Yeah.
A wine like Montes Alpha Cabernet Sauvignon is perceived as being 60% richer and more robust.
That's because Carmina Burana is bang, 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 bang. That's happening in Carmina Burana. You went like this when I started that. You can imagine what the poor old wine's doing, saying, "Oh, quick, give me a glass of wine." The bloke's going bonkers next to me. But if I mean, that's Adrian North. Well done, old chap. But that is a very extreme example. Carmina Burana is a really extreme bit of music.
Well, apparently, if you had the Chardonnay, it tastes 40% fresher with pop music
than Gregorian chant. Well, if it's old and musty and half dead with Gregorian chant, and
but they do have Gregorian
bright and breezy
chants.
with Kylie Minogue. I mean, that's not difficult. You think that's not rocket science.
The like kind of winemaking process, and isn't it like a feng shui inspired barrel room? I haven't been.
But it's got water all over the place, and you know.
But I thought it's interesting, that connection between wine and music.
Yeah.
Music has always been a constant in your life. You've always been singing in choirs, and that kind of what brought you to church at a young age.
I do about 10 concerts a year at the moment.
With harmonica,
Oz and harmonica drink to music. We do these shows where we make the audience drink while we sing all kinds of Baroque music to them. And we pretend it's an experiment to see whether they're enjoying the music more or less than the wine music more.
Like, what do you think?
It does, yeah. Hey, good music you like puts you in a better mood. The wine's going to taste better. Wine that you like puts you in a better mood. Drink a glass of wine and music you weren't sure you liked. You think, I quite like it after all. Yeah, look, these guys, unbelievably, these guys are funded by us, the taxpayers. Oxford University has got this wonderful section of its psychology department. The guys are doing PhD research on this. I think, how on earth did you get that gig? I want that gig. To be funded by the taxpayer, to spend years working out whether this glass of wine tastes better with that bit of music. Honestly, I'm, I obviously don't have. I don't have the learning. That's the trouble. I don't have the learning. But I mean, I'm sure that yes, of course, there is science in it. There's also common sense in it. You feel happy. Wine, wine makes you feel happy. Music you like makes you feel happy. You put a bit of, I don't know, a bit of Schoenberg. Well, and you think, oh God, that's really edgy. A bit of Bartok, you think, oh, that's really edgy. A bit of Johnny Rotten, you think, oh, that's really edgy. Well, if you have a glass of Merlot that you like, is the Merlot going to taste less good? It might, because one of the things about wine tasting is you've got to be in a good mood. This is one of the fundamentals about wine tasting. So true. Amelia, you and I have it at tastings. People go, hey, excuse me, do you mind if I have a chat? And you say, I'm really very busy. I've got 60 wines to do. No, do you mind if I have a chat? No, honestly, now what do you think? What's your favourite? And you think, please go away, please go away. And you eventually start saying, look, I can't, I'm getting really irritated here. You can't taste wine if you're irritated, if you're upset. There's something fundamental, and it's a physiological thing. You know that old English saying that something leaves a bad taste in your mouth? Mm-hmm. That's when you're tense, when you're nervous, when you're stressed. There's an ancient protection mechanism which makes our saliva go bitter.
No way.
Yeah. And so that's why you're going into an interview, you know how your mouth dries out? And if you then put something on that dry mouth, like wine, it'll taste really bitter. So if you're in a bad mood, you can't taste red wine particularly. You can't taste it.
What do you think of this red wine?
I don't know. I'm just looking at it at the moment, longingly.
5 seconds.
5 seconds.
5 seconds.
If we do 5 seconds, honestly, they'll call security.
Well,
this is Montes.
Montes single vineyard Merlot, made exclusively for Majestic. £12.99.
It smells lovely. And it smells slightly spicy, but basically it smells soft.
Yeah.
And that's what you want Merlot
juicy
to smell.
And plump.
And Chilean Merlot, from year dot, has been better than other people's Merlots. Partly because it had another grape mixed in, which is a better grape. Oh, and partly they found good place. This is from a village called Marchichue. And this is where Montes went, 20 or 30 miles closer to the sea, where they said, no one can go, there's no water, no one's ever been there before. And good old Aurelio Montes said, that's not a good enough reason for me not to go there. I think I can grow better grapes there than in the heart of Colchagua, where it's bloody hot.
It is,
Santa Cruz, it boils in Santa Cruz. But in Marchichue, the winds come in from the sea, keeps it a bit cooler, just as much sunshine, but the temperature goes like that, which means you just get that much more freshness. So I'm hoping, and you're looking happy, and I haven't even sung to you yet. So I don't know any Kylie Minogue tunes, so I can't sing you Kylie Minogue. I'll have to sing you Stephen Sondheim.
Well, apparently, sitting on the dock of the bay can work too, but yeah.
Now, it's as serious as you want it to be.
Yep.
If you want a bit of that bitiness in it, that slightly chewy apple skin thing in it, it's there. And a lot of people do want a bit of that in their red wine. But then if you think, well, what's the basic expression in the red wine? It's more like sort of sweet plums or sort of red cherries, that sort of world. And the acidity is, we mentioned red currants. It's things like red currants, cranberries, all mixed in together and ends up a little bit chocolatey.
Yeah, and I got also like a little bit of like fresh spearmint, kind of like there's like a kind of fresh mint.
That'll be the cooler area, the cooler area down towards the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
The Pacific Ocean is bloody cold. I went swimming there a few weeks ago. I was in the Atacama Desert. And I just thought, it's about, it hasn't rained there for 50 years. So you're down by the beach and you think, oh, that looks lovely. And you think, well, no one else is swimming. Always a sign when you go to a beautiful beach, no one is swimming. There's a reason. So I just thought, I'm an Englishman. I can't come to a lovely beach and not rip all my kit off and go and have a dip. So I dashed in there. And about 40 seconds later, I couldn't feel my toes and my fingers. And about 60 seconds afterwards, I thought, if you don't get out pretty sharpish, you will probably lose all your loose bits. All your extremities will be gone for good. I can't have been in there more than about a minute and a half. And it was icy cold. But of course, the thing is, that's the icy cold current coming up from the Antarctic, which creates the winds, which blow through this vineyard here. Even if they have 320 days sunshine of the year, the wind is keeping the temperature down. You keep the temperature down, you can ripen those grapes with the sunshine. You don't need heat, but the temperature being cold keeps it fresh. And this is ripe, but fresh.
It's ripe, but fresh. And there's like a little bit of vanilla spice from the oak or whatever, which is lovely. And no, I think, again, going back to your happy juice description, I think it's a happy juice.
It's sort of serious happy juice.
It's serious happy juice.
If you're a wine buff, you can think, that's a nice glass of wine. If you're not a wine buff, you think, that's a nice glass of wine. So I think this is what Chile does really well.
Yeah.
It can balance people who just want a nice glass of wine and people who want a bit more intellectual stimulation. Chile can easily do both. And I think it's in the last 5 to 10 years, Chile has absolutely transformed itself from being a place dominated by big companies making nice wine, but not exciting wine.
Yeah.
It's now full of exciting wine. And by the way, reds are not the only game in town. The whites from down towards the Pacific Ocean, again, it's really cold down there. The wind just piles up from up those river valleys. It comes up like a sort of Ferrari in second gear. It really comes up and it really hits you. And even in the Atacama Desert, they grow vines in the Atacama Desert because the winds come up so strongly from the sea that even if it hasn't rained for 50 years, it still never gets above about 28 degrees centigrade. And further inland it'll be 45 degrees centigrade. But just on the river valley, it'll be about 28. 28's fine. Nice. 45 is hopeless. I've been further up in the Atacama Desert. You can't breathe. No. You can't sleep at night because you're like that. Every piece of moisture in your nasal cavity has been dried out by the desert heat.
And I've been a few times. I love like horse riding around like the Atacama. Like that's a beautiful way to see the scenery. But yeah, if you go too
far north, I don't know how the horse survives. Let alone me. Maybe the horse doesn't. Maybe you're one of those fierce horse riders who say, come on, come on. The horse stumbles and collapses under you and says, get up, move on, get up. Sort of John Wayne kind of approach to horse riding. You know?
No, definitely
not John Wayne approach. So I'm glad to hear it.
Well, and I also just like shows this, as I said, the link with music. I mean, would you consider wine as one of the arts? In terms of being artisanal or crafted or experimental?
I'm not sure. Really, I think that you can definitely take an artistic and a creative view of it. And the best winemakers all have a vision of flavour. Yeah. They've got something in their heart and their brain, but also their spirit. There's something in their spirit. I mean, a good example is someone like Dermot Sugru in England.
Okay, yeah.
It's not that he's just a brilliant winemaker. He's Irish for a start. That helps. Irish. That helps. But he's got a spirit which is restless and roving and questing and Celtic and therefore not necessarily entirely rational, not necessarily entirely predictable. There's something inside his restless Celtic character which brings out different flavours. There are winemakers probably at least as competent as him, but they don't have the same vision of flavour. They do have a vision of flavour, and their wines will reflect it. But I think the artisticness is often something which the scientist can't really put their finger on anymore. That I can spend 10 years learning how to play the cello and get every single note right in Dvorak's cello concerto and still not play it. Lillian Bayliss used to run the Old Vic Theatre Company, and Laurence Olivier suddenly was off. And his understudy had to go on, and the understudy went on in Hamlet, got every word right, got every move right, came off like that. I did it. And Lillian said, had your chance, missed it. And because he got every word right, he got every move right, but he didn't have the spirit in his performance. And it's the same in wine. There are lots of tremendously talented, clinically effective, technical winemakers, and lots of people who try and find that vision of flavour, and spend the rest of their life and never quite find it, and just a few do. So maybe for that merry few, maybe it is artistic. I think for most people it's not, and I think for most people we go on about the art of art is a very overused word when it comes to food and drink.
Yeah.
And I think if we are not going to cheapen the word art, relatively few chefs and relatively few winemakers genuinely have an artistic touch.
Would you think of yourself as a creative, given your music background, your acting background, how you engage with wine in a very innovative way?
Yes, I am sure I'm a creative, and if I thought harder and felt harder, I could be more of a creative. If I worked harder,
you already work really hard.
I could work harder. I could work better. I could be more of a creative, because sometimes when I'm writing, I write all my books longhand. So 250,000 words. My red and white book was 250,000 words, all written longhand. And sometimes I will try on Monday, I don't know, try on Tuesday, Wednesday comes along, Thursday, I haven't written anything for 4 days. And then on Friday I sit down and I say to myself, sheet of paper, there's the pen. You have to write something, it doesn't matter what. And 4 days worth of turbulence, stewing and germinating and simmering. And suddenly I can write 6,000 to 7,000 words in one day. And sometimes I look at it and I just think, nobody could have written that. And that's I love it when I do that. It's normally a lot like that, but there are chunks of my writing when I just look and think, that was worth all the pain. And no one has written that before, and no one will write that again.
I think being a creative too, that there is always that pleasure comes with that pain, and that you push
pleasure
yourself.
And pain.
Yeah.
Laurence Olivier again, he threw up, physically threw up every single night before he went on stage. He'd be in the side stage loo being sick. He was so nervous before he went on stage. As soon as you go on stage, suddenly he was free. I mean, Julie Goulden, I remember, she used to say, why are you always wandering around in the corner, you know, on the set, looking all nervous? And I said, that's because I am really nervous. She said, oh, I'm not. And I said, are you nervous when the camera goes on you? She said, oh, yes, I'm nervous then. I said, well, I'm not.
I'm more like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Use your nerves. Nerves are crucial.
Yeah.
And it's really boring, because you think, oh God, I've got another 2 or 3 days of feeling really nervous, and I'm going to walk around tense and stressed and sweaty and thinking, oh God, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm no good. I'll never manage it. No one will laugh at my jokes. I'll forget all my words. Oh God, oh God, oh God. And out you go. And within seconds, with the audience there, you start feeling the interest, then the excitement, and then hopefully the love. And people start drawing themselves into what you're saying, and you draw them in, you push yourself out to them, and you just think it was all worth it.
I could sit and talk to you for hours and hours. I'm conscious of the fact that I have to release my team. But there's a couple of things just to wrap up. I'm curious, because you once said that you never felt like you had a career, that you careered upon dreams. And then you also, in another interview, I just remember you saying, like, you just never felt that you were going to retire, that you saw yourself as a Peter Pan, that you were lucky enough that you just never felt you were going to retire. And I can totally see that, and thank goodness. Can I ask what is on the immediate horizon, or not so immediate horizon? I know obviously there's the wonderful music tour you're doing with the Harmonica Consort, which people can sign up and get tickets for.
We've got Oz and Harmonica Drink to Music 1 and 2.
1 and 2, okay.
Then we've got Gin and Phonic, which is the relationship between gin and music. There's a big, it starts in ancient Arab music with alcohol, because alcohol is an Arab word. Alcohol. Kohol is coal. You know that beautiful eye darkener that a lot of Indian women wear? It's beautiful. That's coal, and you can only make it by distillation. That's where the word alcohol comes from. All these words with al in them are Arabic words. And it seems silly now because the Arab nations are generally regarded as Islamic nations which don't drink alcohol. But they weren't 2,000 years ago. Alcohol was invented by the various Arab people around the Middle East. They didn't necessarily use it to drink, though. So Islam didn't make any real difference. They used it for making medicines and perfumes and makeup and all these things. But we say we're going to talk about the world of gin. We start with ancient Arab music, and then we move right through the Baroque world and Hogarth and all these people, to Billie Holiday and Jerome Kern and all the rest. We do all that. So that's gin and phonic. We've got 2 new shows this year. One is Alleluia. So wish you a beer. You're gonna love it. That's the relationship between beer and music.
I love this.
That's premiering.
So when is all this happening? What month?
That's premiering in May, I think.
Brilliant.
And then in June, we've got a new Fairy Queen, which is Purcell's Fairy Queen.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
With loads of Shakespeare.
Oh.
So I've got a variety of those. So I'm doing 4 or 5 different shows this year.
And you're going to be doing your English wine tours as well.
English wine tours.
Yeah.
In June. There's a big new book project, supposedly. But
have we heard it here first?
You've heard it here first.
Amazing.
It's a case of book project, on the whole, when a publisher starts talking about them, on the whole, they happen. Television projects, as you and I know only too well, you start talking about them, and on the whole, they don't happen. I've got like 6 television projects this year. If one of them happens, I would be surprised. You know, hey, you come. We've talked before about English wine, remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
I will ring my agent this afternoon and tell her, remember that thing that you said there was funding for? Amelia and I have been talking about it. What have you done? The idea that there's no proper television series on English wine is laughable.
Also, before I can release you and my team, it's wine confessional time.
Do I need a drink for this?
Well, maybe that could be helpful. This is when I ask my guests if they have any funny, hilarious, perturbing, memorable experiences.
Oh, no challenge then. You know, no pressure, no pressure.
With wine.
Oh.
Yes.
Because this is one of the most important moments in my wine life. When I was an actor, and I was in the English wine tasting team, and we kept beating everybody, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Americans, and I was always in the team, and because I was an actor, I always got my picture on the front page of the newspapers. The others were accountants and lawyers and all these excellent things, but they didn't get their pictures on the front page of the newspaper. I always did, always dressed up in the performance of what I was doing. Once I was a druid at the National Theatre. I was Sweeney Todd when we did the Germans. I was doing the Mitford Girls with Patricia Hodge.
You played all the male parts.
I played all the male parts.
Yeah.
Oh, talk about a happy show. Patricia Hodge and another 5 girls. Patricia Hodge is just the best actress there is, along with Sheila Hancock, who was my Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd. The 2 best actresses you could ever want to work with. And that was the Americans, was it, or the Italians? And then I was doing General Perron when we did the Americans or the Italians. And I got known as the actor who knows about wine. So when Peter Bazalgette, Baz, when he was starting this new show called BBC Food and Drink, the guy who was going to do the wine, Baz said, oh, I want you to do a blind wine tasting in public, in front of an audience, live on television. Only be about 5 or 10 million people watching. Don't worry, nothing, no problem. The guy immediately, got a terminal disease 24 hours before he recovered 2 days later. Don't worry, it was a terminal disease which suddenly got better. Anyway, he funked it. And Baz just said, get me the actor who knows about wine. He didn't know what my name was, but I was doing some show. And I got this message at the stage door, can you get to a studio tomorrow? It was a Sunday. I could. BBC primetime show, young actor, of course I could do it. But I had a cold. And I went down and I said, I met Baz, and he said, okay, I want you to do a blind wine tasting on television. And I thought, I've got a cold. How am I going to do this? And I said, oh, Baz, have you got an audience? He said, yes, there'll be an audience. I said, well, they know what the wine is. He said, oh, they'll know because there'll be a big screen up that they can see with the name of the wine on, but you can't see it. And I just thought, well, I've done television. I've done pantomime. I've done kids theatre. I've done street theatre. I'll find out what the wine is. And I went onto the stage. There was this great big glass like this of a great big golden liquid, all viscous and thick. And I just thought, now, this is when there weren't many Australian wines around.
Okay, there weren't many examples of things. Okay.
I thought, that's Australian Chardonnay. No other wine looks like that. And I thought, there's only 2 Australian Chardonnays I know. One was called Rosemount Estate, and one was called Tyrrell's Vat 47. I just thought, that's Tyrrell's Vat 47. So I walked on the stage and said, hello, audience. Look at that colour. Must be from somewhere warm. There's a little ripple. I thought, is that Australian Chardonnay? And I said, oh, so it could be south of France is quite warm. Silence. But I think it's probably southern hemisphere. Little ripple. I thought it's the Australian Chardonnay. Then South Africa, silence. Chile, silence. Australia, little ripple. I said, I think this comes from Australia. Applause. And I said, what kind of grape variety? Now look at that golden colour. There are grapes like Sauvignon Blanc, silence, which are a bit green. There are grapes like Riesling, silence, which are a bit green. There's a grape like Chardonnay, little ripple. I thought, it's the Australian Chardonnay. Eventually I said, so I think the grape variety is Chardonnay. Well, I bet she ended up saying, I think this wine is Chardonnay from the Hunter Valley, just north of Sydney in New South Wales. It's made by a bloke called Murray Tyrrell, who's got moustache, and his dog's got moustache, and his wife's got moustache, and it's called Vat 47, Tyrrell's Chardonnay from Australia, and it cost $5.99 in Waitrose. And there was an absolute... The house came down. Everyone roared and clapped and cheered. And of course, that's exactly what it was. And I walked off, and Baz said, I had no idea that wine tasting could be showbiz. He said, do you want to become a regular on the next series? And I went, oh, yes, please, yes, please. He said, oh, one thing, by the way, do you realise you forgot to taste the wine?
Busted.
I forgot to taste the wine. So I became known as a brilliant wine taster.
That's so great.
Completely under false pretenses. You heard it here first.
No, very powerful skills and deduction.
Well, it was theatre. It was theatre. And following your own instincts.
Following your own
crucial
instincts,
thing.
theatre.
You looked at and I thought, there's only 2 Australian Chardonnays that I know about. That looks like the Murray Tyrrell's Vat 47. Unless you've got a real reason to change your mind in wine tasting, don't change your mind.
That's actually really good advice. I'm very bad at that. I don't listen to my gut enough. I think
Listen to your gut.
We're just going to do 2 more exercises, aren't we, Ben? Great. And then I'll let you go. This is really good, isn't it?
Nice.
My dad, when he was in Barbados, because he loves the sun and doesn't really allow himself a sunny holiday, but he goes for 10 days in January. And he said the hotel now has this, because Barbados didn't have access to many good wines, actually.
On the east side, the less fashionable side, the Atlantic side, I would have thought there were 1 or 2 places that might. West side will be very strongly tourist hotels. And
so he actually, this became his if he just wanted a glass or 2 at dinner, he'd have this. Also because the markups are so crazy.
Oh. So I last time I was in Barbados, I was there with Joel Garner.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you know about cricket enough?
Well, I've heard of the name. I know vaguely. Remember, we went to the Critic together. I don't think I was.
Well, I was at the Kensington Oval we were doing filming, and we met Joel Garner, and I said, oh, because he's 6'7", bowls. He's called the Big Bird. Bowls the ball, knocks your head off. And I said, oh, Mr. Garner, I'm a great fan of yours. I'd love to face you at cricket. And he gave me a big, long look. He said, I'll bowl at you if you come drinking with me. I went, all right. First ball, went up, padded up, onto the Kensington Oval at Barbados. Went up, padded up. Up, in comes Joel Garner, waxed water, hit it straight through the covers for 4. And I went, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The next dozen balls, every single one, perfectly on a length, just moving away. I missed the next 12 balls. And afterwards, I went drinking with him. And he drank white rum and lilt. Lilt's a sparkling grapefruit drink.
Yeah.
Those guys have hollow legs. As he said when he was with Botham and Viv Richards. Yeah. He said one of them did nothing but smoke weed. Joel did nothing but drink, and one of them smoked weed and drank.
Ian Botham?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying one of them, madam. One of them did both. And they still managed to score more centuries than anybody else and get more wickets than anybody else. They were a wonderful trio at Somerset. He was a smashing guy. That was my Barbados drinking. I don't know how I survived.
Yeah, I think your trip was very different to my dad's this year.
I don't think your dad's view of drinking is quite the same as Joel Garner's and mine.
No, thank you so much, Oz. That you're a force of nature, as usual, and you put up with me and all of my wine questions. Cheers to yours. As I said, you've been absolutely inspirational in terms of my career, but also I think just in terms of bringing wine to so many people of all ages in various mediums, whether it's with James May or whether it's on book form. And I'm really excited because I know you're not going anywhere yet.
Not if I can help it. Where would I go?
Hopefully somewhere with me.
That's a very good idea.
Cheers.